Thank you, Dean, for that kind introduction. Let me first say it's truly an honor to stand here before the graduating class of 2014. I think what George Burns said regarding religious sermons is even truer for commencement speeches. He said the secret of a good sermon is to have a good beginning and a good ending, and have the two as close together as possible. So with that in mind, I'm going to keep this pretty brief. I gave the topic of today's speech a lot of thought. Like Dean said, I teach organic chemistry. So at first I was thinking, maybe I'll talk about that. But then my wife told me, you don't want to bore everyone to death. So instead I'm going to talk about something a lot more exciting, which is rock climbing. So I first arrived in Colorado about 7 years ago when I was a postdoctoral fellow at Colorado State University in Fort Collins. I grew up in Georgia, and I went to graduate school in Austin, Texas. So I'd spent my entire life as a lowlander, and when I arrived in Colorado, I yearned to explore the high peaks and crags of my new home state. So I had no idea what I was doing, so I approached a graduate student at CSU named Brandon, who became my climbing mentor. He told me what gear to buy, how to tie all the basic climbing knots, and simple rock climbing techniques. Pretty soon, we'd planned our first major rock climbing endeavor, which was climbing the third Flatiron in Boulder. Those of you who aren't familiar, it's about 1,000 feet of sustained but easy technical climbing, and you can see it from miles away. As we approached, I was sure that I was going to fall to my grisly death on the route. We quickly hiked to the base, and Brandon led the first pitch. And when I stepped onto the rock, I was even more convinced that I was going to die. But I tried to push the images of my twisted corpse out of my head, and I made the first move. Several hours later, we reached the top of the third Flatiron, and you could see the whole Front Range and even into Kansas. For me, it was a truly life-altering moment. As my confidence grew, Brandon encouraged me to try more technically difficult routes. Each time I was terrified, and each time I lived through the ordeal, in most cases making it to the top with a huge smile on my face. As my confidence continued to increase, I began leading rock climbing pitches. While I'd been previously pretty safe, allowing Brandon to lead, leading lends itself to a whole extra layer of risk. That's why the leader in rock climbing is said to be on the sharp end of the rope. The leader is exposed to more risk because a lead fall can be anywhere from several feet to double the entire rope length. In most cases, I didn't fall, and I lived to climb another day. In one case, I fell about 20 feet, and the rope caught me just as I was hovering above some jagged rocks that easily could have broken both of my ankles. I was grateful to walk away, and I was also humbled. Okay, aside from bragging, why have I told you these stories? I hope the analogy here is fairly obvious. Most of you have spent the last 20 to 30 years under the safety of various guides. Your parents, family, community members, and your professors here at Fort Lewis. What we've tried to do is teach you the basics that you'll need to live the life that you want to lead, to accomplish the enormous goals that you want to accomplish, to climb metaphorical, imposing cliffs and mountains that lay in your future. In a way, you've spent your entire life on belay, relatively safely tied into the rope, while your mentors have taught you how to lead. From this day forward, you're on the sharp end of the rope. You're ready to lead. You've proven that. Your decisions increasingly will expose you to more risk, but also to more reward. You've been mentally training to take the lead since you began school, but how do we do it? Are we really ready? Why are we here today? Okay, why are we here? And by here I mean attending and ultimately graduating from Fort Lewis College. Well, first, there are the obvious financial reasons. College is the best investment that anyone can make. Recent data suggests that college graduates on average earn $1 million more lifetime dollars than those without a college degree. So for starters, one reason why we're here today is to start raking in that cool $1 million. But is that really why most of us are here? Is money the most important reason that we've struggled together for the last few years? There's an ancient Japanese proverb that I'll paraphrase that says, "You can accomplish anything if you sit patiently on a rock for 3 years." Given this context, I'd like to tweak that a little bit to, you can accomplish anything if you sit on a rock for, let's say, between 4 and 6 years. You all sat patiently in our classrooms, in the library, and elsewhere, struggling with the sometimes uncomfortable work that we've subjected you to in the last 4 or 5 or 6 years. You all sat patiently on this rock, Fort Lewis College, and you've not given up. It was probably uncomfortable at times. But now you realize that through your hard work and perseverance, you've accomplished something important. I spoke about my experiences rock climbing because I imagine that in many cases, when each of you were freshmen, you might have thought about the work required in the upcoming 4 years as daunting, scary, nothing short of an imposing cliff standing between you and your future. And you weren't sure you were going to be able to climb to the top of that cliff. Graduation and a college degree was a mountain standing between you and your dreams. Now you're on top of that mountain, and you have a chance to look out or to look back to reflect on what you've actually accomplished. The author René Dalmal stated this much better than I have. He said, quote, "You cannot stay on the summit forever. You have to come down again. So why bother in the first place? Just this. What is above knows what is below, but what is below does not know what is above. One climbs, one sees. One descends, one sees no longer, but one has seen. There's an art of conducting oneself in the lower regions by the memory of what one saw higher up. When one can no longer see, one can at least still know." What kinds of things have you seen from the academic summits you've reached at Fort Lewis College? And how will that experience help you when you descend from the mesa to whatever life you choose to lead? Regardless of what major you've chosen, the liberal arts education that you've engaged in here has prepared you to do at least 4 things. First, to solve complicated problems. The problems that humanity faces are very complicated and will require new and innovative solutions. Climate change, global conflict, disease, political gridlock, environmental preservation. In your history and political science classes, you've learned about how humanity has addressed these problems in the past. In your science classes, you've been exposed to ideas that will enable you to fundamentally understand climate change or disease and to critically evaluate the effectiveness of proposed solutions. In your psychology, sociology, and humanities classes, you've struggled with important ideas that have guided the course of human civilizations, and you've explored the factors that motivate individuals and societies. In all of your classes, you have solved complicated problems. And the world needs people like you who've been trained to solve these complicated problems and evaluate solutions. Second, you've been trained to learn by searching for answers. Those answers could be in a book, on the internet, or data accumulated as part of an experiment. We've conducted those experiments together. And you've asked important questions about the spread of hantavirus in southwest Colorado, or about how mortality affects the decisions that we make, just to name a few ongoing projects here. Third, you've learned how to effectively communicate your ideas, whether it was part of a performance, a portfolio, a class presentation, or a written research paper. You've learned how to convey the ideas that you think are important. And finally, you've learned to use everything that you've gained here to make positive contributions to your community and to your society as a whole. Engineering students have designed sensors for safer nuclear reactors. Business senior seminar students have created business plans to apply what they've learned to starting new businesses in Durango or elsewhere. Okay. Dalmal said you can't stay on the summit forever. And despite how badly you might want to, you can't stay at Fort Lewis forever either. But you will take the skills that you've gained with you when you leave. And in my opinion, at least, the skills that you've gained are much more valuable than the $1 million you stand to gain today with the piece of paper that we hand you. To close, let me say that I don't think it's appropriate for me to give you advice about how to build your life. You have to decide how to build your own life. What we've studied together is a framework for making informed decisions, a training in solving complicated problems, a set of ideas that tend to explain how things work from the atom to the universe, from the behavior of individual people to the politics and history of entire countries of people, a study of the finest art, music, writing, and ideas that humanity has to offer. Your graduation is our certification that you're ready to apply those frameworks and ideas to things that you now think are important. You're ready to take the sharp end of the rope. Everyone in this room is excited to watch you climb those mountains and to watch you lead. Congratulations to you, the class of 2014. Thank you.